is being available for community events such as this, and so convenient. And within a 5-minute walk of 10 bars, so research or restaurants or whatever we want. So thanks again for coming out on Thursday afternoon. With us today, really pleased to have Steve Cover, Director of Planning, Ryan Chaplin, General Manager. Rihanna, I'm afraid I don't remember your title, but
Senior Planner.
Senior Planner, and Rebecca Webster, who, by the way, is the best moderator of Zoom events I've ever come across, and watched the event a few weeks ago. I'm also pleased, as I look around the room and look at the sign-up sheet, we have people from Marina Towers, Revo, Citrus Square, 1350 Main, BLVD, Bay Plaza, the Mark, Orange Club, 101 Condos, and I've missed the Jewel. Okay, Jim, I'm missing a few.
I'm down there.
The point is, we've got a nice array, I think, and that was our objective today, to try and get a representation, if you will, of quote-unquote more or less downtown kind of folks. I'm also pleased we've got some business owners with us. Jesse from the Gator Club is here with Larry. Okay, welcome. And I know we had a realtor signed up. Holly, are you here? Okay, but and then Mark Kaufman is to be joining us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize my wife, Martha, who's here, puts up with me and all this work I do. So, in select, and to be a little bit more serious, what is being presented is really important. And it's being considered the restaurants, bars, nightclub matters in parallel with the noise ordinance. So it kind of intermixed a little bit, but today's remarks are not going to be about noise per se, but about around zoning, which kind of overlaps with that. This is a great time to be doing this. These zoning things need to be cleaned up. There's some ambiguity and conflicts with state liquor laws and stuff that I don't really understand. And as I think we all know, the growth downtown continues at a rapid pace. We're going to have 3,000 more residents downtown in the next 5 years. We're about 12,000 now. So if there ever was a time to get our collective thoughts together and papered up, it is, maybe we're a little bit late now, but 3 to 5 years ago, from now it's going to get that much more complex. And also, I don't want to say exacerbating, but a factor was, hi Eileen, New Hampshire Chair of DID, thank you for coming.
I was hoping I could sneak in.
Another factor, of course, is the growing popularity of outdoor restaurants and rooftop bars or establishments, if you will, which kind of add to the complexity. So today, we're going to be using, or the planning department's going to be making a presentation, and then we're going to have ample time for questions and comments. DSCA hosts these kinds of events to help facilitate a discussion in our community. We aim that they are informative, an opportunity for sharing views, looking for common ground, actionable, and constructive. So when you speak, we would hope that you would have those principles in mind. I found Steve and his team to be really good listeners. How many of you were on the Zoom call a few weeks ago? So it looks like maybe only a quarter of you. So some of you that were on that Zoom call may see some of the things in the presentation repeated, but 3/4 of you would be new information. We will be recording this, so we can put it up at our website for future viewing or passing it on. So with that said, I would like to turn the meeting over to Steve Cover. Steve, thanks for you and your team for being here today.
Absolutely, thank you. Thanks, really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yeah, what we're going to be covering today, I know some of you were on the previous Zoom meeting, but we're going to be covering today is really something very important for really the downtown area, but also the rest of the city. And it's focusing on zoning text amendments to change the rules and regulations we have for bars, restaurants, and nightclubs. We've just gotten a lot of feedback over the years, a lot of input, but that's also the purpose of this meeting this afternoon, is really to get your input as well, because you obviously have an insight that maybe we don't have on some things, so we're really eager to hear what you have to say. Just to go over the overview of what we're going to be presenting, obviously the goal of all of this, the key terms and definitions, which are really critical right now, because they're not very good in the zoning code that we have currently. Additional use standards, primary uses, the separation requirements, and then we'll have a summary of all of this at the end. But I would like to start off with the goal, like David said, keep in mind this is just zoning text amendments, rules and regulations. This does not have to do with noise. I just want to remind everybody of that. I know that's an issue, but that's something that's going to be worked on later. But anyway, currently a lot of the definitions for our restaurants and bars are tied to state licensing. We felt like we really had to go beyond that. So we have some situations where there's some restaurants out there that maybe are functioning more like nightclubs, and actually sometimes in reverse, nightclubs that really are more like restaurants. So it's very confusing to a lot of people out there. And so we want to update our current definitions. We want to determine a clear process for everyone, which we'll be covering today. Suitable zoning districts for these different kinds of uses, and standards for outdoor seating, which is obviously, there's been a lot of focus on that. And the goal really is to clarify and create regulations that are clear, concise, and really meet the needs of not only the businesses in downtown, but also the residents that live downtown. Like I said, I'd like to remind you one more time, we're not talking about noise today. I just want to mention that one more time, and I'll turn it over to Brianna.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so there is a lot of information that we're going to cover today. There was a flyer that you could have picked up. I'm sure there's more back there if we need to be passed out. But in case you can't see what's on the screen, a lot of the information is also on here, and it's nice to have a takeaway because there is a lot of information that we're going over. So to begin, we'll briefly present the most common types of licensing in Florida for bars, restaurants, and nightclubs. These terms are monitored and defined by the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So these aren't the city definitions or terms, these are state definitions and regulations. The first one is the 2 consumption on premise, or commonly known as a 2 COP license. This license permits the sale of only beer and wine products by the drink or in sealed containers for consumption on or off premise. So the 2 COP, think of the beer and wine. The second definition, for consumption on premise special food service, or known as the 4 COP SFS license. This license permits the sale of beer, wine, and liquor products by the drink for consumption on premise. There are kind of 4 main standards that are associated with the 4 COP SFS. This includes that the establishment must have 2,000 square feet of service area. It may be equipped to serve up to at least 120 persons at one time, with at least 120 physical seats. And over 51% of their sales must be for food or non-alcoholic beverages. I have these 2 numbers highlighted from the 2,000 to 120 because there's recent changes that become effective July 1st. It was previously 2,500 square feet of service area and had to be equipped to serve meals for 150 persons. So just wanted to note those changes. And then the third type of license is the for consumption on premise, or the 4 COP. This is the full liquor license. It permits the sale of beer, wine, and liquor products. However, it doesn't have those requirements of the 4 COP SFS, so So this typically is for the bars or nightclubs or even small restaurants that do not have the capacity to serve 120 individuals at a time or the 2,000 square feet. If they'd like to continue to serve liquor, they're required to have the 4 COP license. So you'll hear those terms throughout the presentation, and if you need to look back to the sheet that is available.
Did they eliminate the SRX then?
Yeah,
Same
it's
thing.
changed. Yeah, it's just changed names to SFS. Then we'll also go over the 3 types of review for the city uses and permitting types. There's permitted uses, a minor conditional use, as well as major conditional use. And a permitted use, for example, is a restaurant. That's typically permitted by right within commercial or downtown zoning areas. There's also a minor conditional use, and an example would be a private club. So within the downtown, a private club or a bottle club that requires a review from staff as well as 1 public hearing with the planning board. And a major conditional use, an example would be a nightclub. This requires the review from staff as well as a presentation and public hearing in front of the planning board and the city commission. An application for a major and minor conditional use are required to be accompanied by a site plan, and so they also go through the DRC, or the Development Review Committee process. And these intensity of uses correlate with the permitting type. So the less intense would be permitted by right, where the more intensity use a nightclub goes through the more public hearing process. This next section of the presentation will be covering the existing definitions within the city zoning code, and then also going over the difficulties that the city's been experiencing and how they've had challenges regulating these uses. The first term is a restaurant. So this is a commercial establishment of which the principal business is preparing and serving meals selected from a menu to customers during all operating hours. That is an important part of this restaurant component. And the definition states currently that meals are prepared within a structure and may be served and eaten on premise. The city has received some development applications and questions recently about if food can be cooked off-site and then brought to the restaurant establishment. We do want to codify in the zoning code that that is allowed. This is becoming a more common use called a pop-up kitchen, where it's prepared off-site and then brought and eaten at a restaurant. We also are having difficulty that some restaurants are transitioning at night from the restaurant use to more of a nightclub use by maybe moving the tables out of the way and creating a dance floor. So really trying to determine the definitions and make the differences between a restaurant use and a nightclub use. Are we doing questions? I don't know whether to wait till the end for questions, if we can. Okay. And so then for the restaurant, these key components, which is also the components that we're using to begin to draft these definitions. So we're considering the difficulties, the challenges that the city is facing, as well as the concerns that we heard from our virtual information session that was held June 8th. And these key components is that it is a commercial establishment, that the principal business is the preparation and serving of meals, and codifying that meals can be prepared on or off-site. The next definition is bar. So the existing definition states an establishment which is devoted primarily to the retailing and on-premise drinking of alcoholic beverages. The first issue in the zoning code is that it doesn't provide a clear distinction from a bar and an outdoor bar, so we'll cover that definition next. And then the second one is in the zoning code, there are use tables that say where these uses are permitted, whether they're permitted, a minor conditional use or a major conditional use. In most of our use tables, bars, tavern, and nightclub are all grouped together. Whether they should have the same process, they currently all require a major conditional use, but it's something to look and see if the processes should maybe be different. And then also looking at eliminating the term tavern, because it's more of an outdated term, and just keeping with bars and nightclubs. So the key components for the proposal, again, it's a commercial establishment. The principal business is the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages, and the location of the serving counter is indoors. There's confusion about whether it's a bar and outdoor seating, and that really is based on the location of the serving counter. So the definition for outdoor bar is any building, structure, or facility, whether temporary or permanent, which is built, erected, or provided as a location for the purpose of making retail sales of alcoholic and intoxicating beverages. It also only allows outdoor bars currently as an accessory use to a hotel, motel, or private club. So the difficulty in this definition, you can see nowhere in the existing definition does it mention outside or outdoor areas. And currently, because it's only allowed as an accessory use to those hotel, motels, and private clubs, it can't stand as a primary use. So the key components for the proposal and the new definition would maintaining a commercial establishment. The principal business is still the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages. However, the location of the serving counter is outdoors. So you can see in these photos, this is clearly an outdoor bar. This is not taken from Sarasota. And we also want to include additional use standards that are existing. Within the zoning code, there are standards for restaurants that have outdoor seating. They should apply to any outdoor seatings, whether it's an outdoor bar, to accessory uses or breweries, so including those establishments with these standards. The nightclub definition. So the existing definition for a nightclub ties the 4 COP liquor license with the establishment. So any restaurant, dining room, bar, or similar establishment providing food or refreshments and which holds a 4 COP liquor license is considered a nightclub. Then it continues to read, however, any restaurant, dining room, or similar establishment which holds a 4 COP liquor license with the SRX or SR, which is now considered the SFS or the Special Food Service, is deemed as an accessory to the principal use and not a nightclub. So this has caused difficulties for numerous reasons. The first one is, in order to regulate properly, the licensing should be removed from the definition and should focus on the intensity of the use, such as the hours of operation, whether there's live amplified music, and then what time and how long is the amplified music continuing in that space. This definition also doesn't consider restaurants that transition from a restaurant into a nightclub later in the evening. Well, because those would be currently zoned and permitted as a restaurant, but may transition into a nightclub later on. And then this third reason is it's misleading. Uses that actually function as a restaurant, but do not meet that 2,000 square foot service area requirement or the ability to seat 120 people. So there may be restaurants that are smaller in size that close at 10 o'clock and do not have live amplified music, but are getting categorized as a nightclub because they hold the 4 COP. And they have to both go through the same process, the planning board and city commission, as a major conditional use, while their intensities and the uses are completely different. So the proposal for these key components while we're working on drafting the definition, again, it's a commercial establishment, but it includes the live amplified music such as DJs, bands, and sound amplification. And it operates later into the evening, and it includes a bar and alcohol consumption. And then for the last term, but not the last section, is bottle club. Currently there's not a definition for bottle club in the zoning code, but there is a definition for the city code. The difficulty now is it's being classified as a private club, which it would continue to be so, but we do need to provide a definition into the zoning code and to list this as an example of a private club. So the key components, again, similar to a private club, it does require a membership, and it's more the service and consumption of alcoholic beverages rather than the selling. This third section as additional use standards. So within the city's zoning code, there are these additional use standards. for the outside seating areas, as you mentioned. And these requirements should be applied to bars, outdoor bars, accessory outdoor bars, and similar establishments. These use standards include hours of operation, a buffering and separation requirement, and then also a screening requirement. These standards have a city-wide applicability. It's not just the downtown, but it is city-wide for those commercial areas. And the purpose of the standards are designed to facilitate outdoor seating areas, to promote public health, general welfare and safety, and to create a pedestrian experience. Section 4 discusses and reviews again those permitting process, which we previously discussed, so the permitted use, the minor conditional use, and the major conditional use. And a primary use table is used to identify which uses are allowed within a given zone district. So the restaurant, a permitted use, typically takes about 3 months. A minor conditional use, again, requires staff review and planning board. Takes a little longer, about 3 to 5 months, and this is exclusive of building permit review. A major conditional use, for an example of a nightclub, requires the staff review or DRC, a planning board, and then as well a city commission public hearing. And this is the more intense use, it takes a longer time. And these new definitions should clearly define each use, and then the use should correlate with the intensity and the amount of time that it takes to review. In the current review process, we've gone over some of these. Again, the bar is a major conditional use currently. An outdoor bar is only permitted as an accessory use to hotel, motels, and private clubs, and a nightclub is a major conditional use. And again, in our code right now, we're seeing bars, taverns, and nightclubs on the same line, the same process, and wanting to look and see with the new definitions if that will still be required. Also, within the zoning code, there is a separation requirement in the exemption area. So the code states, no bar, tavern, nightclub, or alcoholic beverage store shall be permitted at any location within 500 feet from the nearest school or church, synagogue, sanctuary, property residentially zoned, or another bar, tavern, nightclub, or alcoholic beverage store. So this is separating those uses for alcohol-related uses from one another, as well as the schools, residentially zoned properties, and religious institutions. And those separation requirements apply citywide, except for within this certain area in the downtown. And this is a map. It's a little difficult to read, but the boundaries are Ringling to the south, 301 to the east, Fruitville to the north, and Palm and Coconut to the west. And this downtown exemption area map exempts bars, taverns, or nightclubs to be separated from one another. So this is our most intense commercial uses, so you don't have to have the 500 feet from a bar to a bar. However, it does still require the 500 feet separation from schools, churches and synagogues, or residentially zoned properties. To be clear, residentially zoned properties are residential zone districts. So we have residential single-family homes, or RSF, as well as residential multifamily homes, RMF. Within the downtown, this is considered a mixed-use zone district and not a residentially zoned area. So we would like to discuss expanding the exemption area. There have been redeveloping commercial areas in the downtown, such as areas north of Fruitville. We did speak at the Rosemary meeting last week, and then there are other areas to consider, such as east of 301. So here is a proposed map that we'd like to also discuss. And then, in summary, currently there is confusion and lack of clarity pertaining to definitions and standards for bars, outdoor bars, and nightclubs within the city zoning code. This has resulted in establishments being classified as nightclubs that do not act as one, while others are restaurants being classified as nightclubs, vice versa. The next step is drafting a zoning text amendment that aims to administer regulations for entertainment-oriented uses. These are uses as restaurant, bars, and nightclubs. and based on the intensity of the establishment, including elements of live amplified music, operating hours, and how long these live amplified music may go on into the night, and that instead of the state licensing requirement. And also there will have to be a discussion of the transition period for existing establishments. Some that may be classified now, if the zoning text amendment is approved, may have to go through the major conditional use process, and there would have to be a determination of how long they have to come and meet the current code. Sorry, this clicker a little backwards. Okay. And the timeline, we had our public information session on June 8th. It was pretty well attended, had about 68 people. It is available on the city website, but this is pretty much the same information. And we are here. In the summer, we're going to continue with our public outreach. We'll be presenting at CCNA, the DID and the BID. We met with the Rosemary District. We'll continue to work with the Chamber of Commerce as well. And after we've had thorough discussion and outreach, staff will file the zoning text amendment. It will then continue to go through the Development Review Committee process, or DRC. And then after DRC has received full sign-off, it would be planned for a planning board date. The planning board gives a recommendation to the city commission and then scheduled for a city commission. Both the planning board and city commission public hearings have more opportunity for public outreach as well. And thank you. That concludes our presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, just, there's lots of time left, folks, so be patient when you recognize that we've got up to an hour, I think. So, recognizing this gentleman right here.
Brianna, I have two questions. The first one is, or to all of you, the technical changes are good, the clarity is good. Does the city have an overall view of what it would like these things to look at the end of the day? You know, some cities have an entertainment district, some cities have, you know, is there some overall driving policy issue here?
I'll take that. There's really not. It's just a matter of trying to bring clarity to the definitions we have today that's a bit outdated, trying to clear that up. And bring a clear process to what a restaurant, bar, and nightclub would have to go through to be.
And the second question is, now I understand in the downtown core, it's now a multi-use district, so there's no separation requirement between a residential building and a bar. Is that correct?
That's been in place for some time.
Correct. Is there any thought of changing that?
In terms of contracting it?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Typically in the downtown is where you have your entertainment-oriented types uses in your urban core. That exemption has been in place for quite some time, so there wasn't a discussion as far as trying to contract it.
So what is the exemption? It's not with the resident, it's only with the church and the school? So there isn't a bar within 100 feet of the church and school?
Church, school, or residencies in the property.
And that is, we're compliant with that?
The downtown is now a mixed use area, not a residentially zoned area.
I
So
get
there's
the
no
residential, but
There's no separation.
what about it? So there's no separation for a church? So a bar can be right next to it?
There currently is something that's going to be
Yeah,
reviewed, but yes, today there currently is a separate requirement between the church.
One person at a time, John Bordeaux.
Hi. My sense here prior to this meeting was, right or wrong, is that the primary purpose of this meeting was to make it easier to approve outdoor bars and rooftop bars. After this presentation, that's even more clear to me now. And to that I say, don't we have enough loud, late-night, amplified music? Think Melvin's, think Art Ovation, think Pizza and Brew, think other establishments. Don't we already have enough downtown crime, okay, that's generated from these alcoholic consumption businesses, okay? Every weekend there's at least a dozen 911 calls for downtown for suspicious persons, fights, arrests, drug usage, etc.
John, I think it would be helpful.
No, I know.
Can you put it in the form of a question?
I'm getting to it. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me please. I'll try to make it quick. All right. My point is, you know, we don't need any more downtown outdoor bars and rooftop bars, okay? This won't help, okay? You know, my sense is that we need staff and we need the commission to be more resident advocates and not bar advocates. The other thing, and I'll move on, David, here, okay, is that what I'm disturbed about is that the zoning code can be altered, can be adjusted. Case in point, a petit brasserie is classified as a nightclub, okay? It's crystal clear in the zoning that a nightclub has to be 500 feet from a church. The petit brasserie is 61 feet from the Methodist church and it was approved. When I asked why was this approved, when it's not consistent with the zoning code, I was told that the church had no objection, so we modified the zoning code. We adjusted this separation distance to 61 feet. So my question to you is, why did that happen, and will that happen in the future?
So the adjustment, as you correctly referenced, that was a process, that was an actual approval granted by the planning board to reduce that separation requirement between La Petite and the church.
Even though it's not consistent with the zoning code?
That's why they sought an adjustment and they received it. What's happened historically, every single adjustment that's ever been applied for a reduction of separation requirement between a bar, a nightclub, and a church has always been granted. In fact, there's never been a church that's come out in opposition of said adjustments. So that's something that we're looking at because of just the historic use of that and how that's been treated in the past.
Regardless of the historic use, okay, why have a zoning code if it can be adjusted to that?
Okay. All right,
I'm
let's
done.
move,
David, thank you.
we'll move along to Jesse.
Jamie, thank you.
Jamie.
I apologize, I'm losing my voice. Thank you for hosting this meeting again. I have a couple questions. Do we know how many businesses, not including nightclubs, bars, restaurants, but also apparel stores and other that are downtown in the mixed-use area? Do we know how many appropriate?
We can get that, not off the top of our heads, but we can find out.
Another question that just pops in my head all the time, we're restricting, it just seems like bars, nightclubs, restaurants for their use. And we're talking about separation of churches and everything. But I think one thing we also need to think about is, yes, we do have residents and bars and nightclubs and stores and banks and all of that in downtown. But when are we going to restrict everything else that is being built around us? We're talking about 3,000 more residents coming into downtown. That means there's going to be 3,000 more people that are going to have to eat and drink and shop and go to the bank. But everyone wants to complain about the bars and the restaurants and the outdoor seating. People are going to want to sit outside. So I think on both sides of it, we're going to be allowing these builders to build condos 20 feet from the back of an entire city block of restaurants and bars that have been there for many years. That was approved by the city, and I know I said this in June 8th, but we are being punished and chastised for being an existing business with an operating plan, with our license, with current licensing. We follow the rules by the state. We have adjusted our business plan from the day people moved in to be nice neighbors. And I feel like we are always battling for a business that's been existing. I'm gonna stop there. Anyway, I have one other question though. So the mixed use, major use permitting, is that something that you're gonna have to reapply for if we already existing have our license in place for 20 years? Are we gonna have to go in front of a board to get a major use permit?
So in your situation, the Gator Club is already considered a nightclub, so no, you wouldn't. It could be a scenario where there's a restaurant that, you know, sort of operates as a nightclub maybe later on into the evening, but it's classified as a restaurant. With new language and how these uses are defined, that may require that entity to go through the process.
Okay,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
well, let's go back to Jim Lample.
Yes, playing off of John Bordeaux, is there a saturation point for bars and restaurants to be reasonably limited? Every situation has a carrying capacity, and I think what we're hearing from downtown residents is we've had more than a carrying capacity, a saturation point. does the city have a limit to how many bars and restaurants? Or if a clothing store goes out, can that be a bar and restaurant?
Sure, it would depend on the zone district, what could be allowed there, but the city typically doesn't regulate, those are market uses, market forces that drive that, right? The city doesn't really dictate the number of clothing stores or bars or restaurants, it's market driven.
But we do restrict liquor licenses, right?
The state has a liquor license requirement that someone must apply, but.
But is there a limit of how many liquor licenses are available in the downtown core?
I believe it's, I don't know if it's by downtown versus county, but that's at the state level.
If it was downtown specific, that would limit the saturation of bars and restaurants, right?
At the state level, though, that would be the decision, that's not a city.
So you're saying the city has no jurisdiction on that?
The licenses are administered by the state.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, so I'm not sitting on this either way, but I just want to, in layman's terms, and I don't see anyone here from Al Melvin, but I'm just going to use that as an example. So I'm not picking on them at all, I'm just going to ask the question. In layman's terms, how does this, if all these things are put in place and are going forward, how does this change the way that they're operating? We all know them to have been a restaurant, and then they went restaurant, nightclub. How does this change that? Or what is this going to look like going forward?
So typically what we've found, a lot of the issues stem from the live amplified music, right? Whether that be a band or a DJ. After certain, certain hours of the night. The thought is, how a nightclub is defined, that probably should have an element of live amplified music. Typically when you think of nightclub, you think of that kind of activity. That's not defined today. That's not in the code today. So that's one thought. And then perhaps the time that this live amplified music is going on. If it's late into the evening, typically it's going to be a nightclub activity. Maybe if it's earlier on, maybe that's not a nightclub. So those are some of the thoughts there. Certainly wouldn't be considered a restaurant playing live amplified music, late into the night.
So the way that would change would be that it's a restaurant now, and that's what they have their license for.
Correct.
Technically. They would have to come again and reapply to have a nightclub.
Yeah, it'd have to go through that process of the DRC, the planning board, and city commission process in order to get approved.
And that would be a part of what would be affected person status, where people would be able to have discussion on that, correct?
Yes, everybody within a 500-foot radius would be notified of the public hearings.
So they would not be grandfathered, so that this all would have us go back to the drawing board with them in layman's terms.
Correct. There wouldn't be a grandfathering, there'd be a transition period, but there wouldn't be a grandfathering.
Okay.
Okay, Larry?
So my question is, this doesn't affect me, but as a restaurant, say I'm open till 2 a.m. and I serve food until 1 a.m. Now what I decide to do, whether I move the tables to the side and I put a DJ in there and keep my doors closed and it's not so noisy, how is that breaking the rules? You understand my question?
I do. Today it wouldn't be. I think that's part of the
So you want
crux
to
here
try to redefine it so that
is the activity that's happening. That's the
But
issue.
you're still serving food.
And that's fine, but then you mentioned there's live amplified music associated with the serving of food, and that creates a different element than if they're just a restaurant serving food till 1, 2 in the morning.
So you want to narrow that definition so that they can't do that?
Well,
Unless they get a special...
Yeah, we're not saying it's prohibiting them from doing it, there'd be a different process, but there needs to be some clear language, because it's not in the code today, and that's creating confusion.
Right. Well, I mean, there's several that are doing it now, so... Okay.
Linda?
Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for having this session. The downtown really is most impacted, and so we appreciate this opportunity to learn more and to provide feedback. I have two questions. One goes to the question that was asked earlier about what is the public policy purpose of this whole package of proposals. Your all stated reason is to provide clarity. I'd like to go through a couple of things to demonstrate that it's more than clarity, it goes toward greater permissiveness. So I would ask you in your outreach and presentations to be more transparent and clearer with the public that it's not just about clarifying and cleaning up. These are big policy changes. For example, the liquor license not being considered anymore. The problem that we've had is not that liquor license is considered in the nightclub definition. The problem is that liquor license is not considered in the bar definition. In my view and my direct experience, having a liquor license and the type of liquor license directly relates to the character and activity of the establishment. Hard liquor is hard liquor. It's a very different thing than beer and wine. I think myself, the liquor license should be included in the definition or a consideration in terms of what defines a bar. A bar is basically a place that focuses on alcohol. What can tell us more about the extent to which the place focuses on alcohol than the state liquor license? I think it's relevant. Second, you are taking, this is huge, your proposals are taking out bars from being required to go through the major conditional use process. I don't know if everybody understands that, but what that means is today, to be a bar, tavern, or nightclub, you have to go through the major conditional use process, which includes community workshops and going before the planning board and the city commission. These proposals, you're saying the MCU process would be taken out for bars. We had that happen with the Artivation Rooftop Hotel, and there was no community workshop that they were required to do at that time, and 5 years later, the problems still exist. Another one is you're proposing to enlarge the area, that the lack of to reduce enlarge the area that would have less separation. That means basically more bars, to Jim Lample's question. You are proposing to allow outdoor bars for the first time in the history of the city of Sarasota, except for hotels, motels, and clubs. That's huge. The outdoor nature of the establishment and the activity is very significant. Nightclub hours, I appreciate that change, just trying to tighten that up a little bit, but I ask you to please consider daytime hours too. For example, outdoor rooftop pools and bars have pool parties, Sunday afternoon, Sunday fun day. And then I'm going to wind up with a question. Well, I've asked some questions already, sure. David, and then my last question is, and I really would like an answer now, is to what extent have you considered in this greater permissiveness approach the public safety and the factors and implications, and have you researched and reviewed, like many of us here have, weekend after weekend, night after night, the 911 database and the SPD reports that show a lot of problems at particular addresses in the downtown that happen to be bars or restaurants that then convert to bars, including hotels.
Okay. So some of the issues with the outdoor bars, I'm not sure we followed actually what was discussed, is perhaps having a different process for an outdoor bar and how it would be permitted. I don't think we said it would be permitted by right, an outdoor bar. In terms of the calls for service related to alcohol-related establishments, and we've done some preliminary research, there may not be as clear of a correlation as you may believe for alcohol-related establishments and calls for service at certain times of the evening. So we're continuing to get some more information and data on that.
What do you mean?
Well, I think you had said that there's, there's a number of calls for several incidents, I think you said, for particular establishments, alcohol-related establishments. Yeah, I don't know which ones you're referring, but, I don't know as a whole if there's a complete correlation.
We see it every weekend.
Okay, Ryan, may I ask a question? Microbreweries and microdistilleries, how are those a factor in what you're proposing? They, of course, are growing in popularity. Sure. And how does that factor into what you're looking at?
So those are already defined in the code. So that's not really part of this because they already allowed in certain zone districts. And we already have definitions in the code for, say, a microbrewery, a nanobrewery, a distillery, etc.
So there will be there's harmony between, there will be harmony between what you're working on now and what's.
And those, David, those may be a little less intense than, your nightclub type use.
Okay, Cheryl?
And so I think it's unfortunate that the city doesn't have an overarching policy or plan framework to balance the needs of residents along with the needs of bars and restaurants, and to have also a balance of other commercial entities, so that we don't become a downtown that's just a concentration of bars. We're happy, every resident I know, and certainly I personally am in favor of our restaurants and bars that are good neighbors succeeding. That's a good thing. But for the city to become concentrated, the core to become just a concentration of bars and nighttime music, etc., is not a good thing in my view. The city is approving more and more residents to move into the downtown area. We need a balance of resident-friendly along with vibrant. And my question is, why don't you have an overarching vision, plan, policy framework for balancing the needs of residents with the bars and restaurants?
I think we do. I think because of trying to look at these restaurants that, are morph into nightclubs legally today, trying to address that type of behavior. So I think we are sensitive to that, trying to, as part of this ZTA, address some of those activities that aren't, quite frankly, addressed today.
The gentleman with the ball cap.
I'm from the Gator Club, and I just had a question. Is there any clear language on the restaurants and FSS side to when they can serve alcohol till at night based on the closing of their kitchen? I thought there was additional language that was in there. Am I mistaken on that? I thought it was you had to have your kitchen open, you could serve drinks for an hour past that.
Well, generally in the city today, it's in the city code, it's up to 2:30 a.m.
Okay. But you had to have your kitchen open if you were a restaurant at SFS. And now up until, if you want to serve till 2:30, you had to have your kitchen open till 1:30. Is that in there? Is it being addressed? Is it just being ignored?
Yeah, that's more at the state level, that requirement.
But there is language, so
It's just type of license.
okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure. I thought there was that clarity, it's just not being addressed. That would help some of those issues.
John, you're up again.
Real quick, maybe I missed this, but Linda was saying, are you saying that in the future, someone who applies for a bar or an outside bar or rooftop bar or a nightclub will not require a major conditional use and will not require workshops and public hearings?
We didn't say anything to that effect.
Okay, so the answer is they will require workshops, they will require public hearings, they will require notifying affected residents within 500 feet. They will require to be 500 feet in the core from churches and synagogues. All is what I just said, was that what?
I don't know that we said all that either. I think what we said was what I said with respect to the outdoor bars, that right now that process is very ambiguous. It's in the code, how it's defined. Trying to clean that up with an outdoor bar going through that process you mentioned. Right now, it's not clear in the code.
No, I understand, and that's why you need to clear that up. But my concern is that outdoor bars, rooftop bars, et cetera, should, in the new revised regulations, zoning code, require public hearings, require separation in the exemption area, require public hearings, and require affected persons' notifications. Is what I think is appropriate for what many people here believe. Does anybody here think I'm wrong in that?
Well,
For an outdoor bar, yeah, I don't.
Yes.
we just
We'd love to
clarify,
have more businesses.
are the changes gonna make it easier or harder or the same to get a license for a bar or an outdoor bar?
I think it depends. It depends. First of all, the changes haven't even been finalized yet. And secondly, we've talked about, an outdoor bar versus a restaurant versus a nightclub versus a bar. So you have a lot of different uses and how they're going to be defined. and probably going through different processes.
Okay, well, let's assume a bar wants to open on Main Street today.
Can I answer your question? I think, what we're trying to do here is make it a heck of a lot clearer than it is now.
No, I understand that.
Let me finish. So, and so there's going to be a lot more clarity for everyone involved, whether it's the residents, whether it's the businesses, whether it's the people who are reviewing the projects here in the city. It's going to be much clearer and much simpler for everyone to understand. But we eventually, and we haven't finalized anything yet, but what we want to do is eventually make what we think are the most appropriate recommendations for each of these kinds of uses and the most appropriate processes for those kinds of uses. This is not a giveaway. This is not a free-for-all. What we're trying to do, if it's more intense, it needs to be more closely scrutinized, not only by the staff, but the planning board and the commission. So that's eventually what will be coming.
That makes sense, and clarity is a very good thing for everybody, there's no doubt about that. But let's do this. If you're gonna open a bar on Main Street today, what do you need to do?
Today, you'll have to go through the DRC, the planning board, and the city commission process.
Because it's treated as a nightclub, it's in the same line as a nightclub.
And after you propose changes?
We're proposing that a nightclub is different than a bar.
And so what would a bar have to do?
Not sure, it's going to have to depend on the zone district.
In the downtown core?
In the exemption area.
I think people are asking for, currently there's a process for community input. And if this process is, once they meet the definition, there is no opportunity for input. I think that's what a lot of people are concerned about. That we're all of a sudden going to just, because they met the rules, they're going to be able to do a rooftop bar, an outside bar, or something like that, because the process is much easier for them, right? So it's just like, I think everybody's asking for, give us an opportunity when these permits, or whatever they're called, are approved, to the neighbors, the impacted neighbors, to be able to come, listen to it, and provide their comments.
Sure.
It sounds like you guys haven't figured out what the process is going to be.
Well,
no, I think they have figured out what the process is, and it's gonna be easier to get a bar on the outdoor, and they're not telling us.
Okay, again, an outdoor bar would be a public hearing process. Right now, it's not, that's what I was trying to refer to earlier, it's not really defined in the code that way. It will be a public hearing process for an outdoor bar. Outdoor bar, rooftop bar would be one and the same, right? It's fine as an outdoor bar. But that's how it would be treated. Because of that, and then it's going to depend on the intensity as well.
When you say intensity, what do you mean?
Are they playing live amplified music? Are they having a DJ?
Okay. I mean,
I'm still.
95% of the businesses on Main Street are very good neighbors. There's a few that are very bad neighbors. And what we try to do as residents is work with the people that care about us and are good neighbors, and try to, limit the people who are not good neighbors.
So when you buy a house, do you go around the neighborhood and ask the neighbors in the neighborhood what kind of people they are? Because I feel like as a nightclub, a bar, a restaurant, we're not given the opportunity to say if we want you as a neighbor. And John is asking he wants a right of refusal for what goes in downstairs his apartment. Well, I wasn't given a right of refusal for him to move in there and complain about my business.
Yes, but you get to go home though. We are.
Close your doors.
All right, Patrick, did I see Patrick? Patrick, you raised your hand.
Yes, first of all, Stephen Group, thank you for trying to define. Sitting on the planning board, these things came before, and it was difficult. So getting definitions is clear. But at this stage, and my assumption is this is our last input session before you come back out with red line ZTAs going for the planning board. Will we have a chance to see your proposed changes on the matrix? Bars, what's the permitted minor major? Nightclubs, permitted minor major, outdoor. When will we see the red lines proposals for that before you submit it for formal public hearings?
So the application should be filed next month, and then once that's filed, we'll distribute it we'll send a link to David, he can disseminate it to the group, but that'll be out there probably next month.
Okay, so how is the public input helping to define whether or not a bar will be minor or major?
I think, the meeting we had on June 8th, this meeting, other public outreach sessions we've had, all help to do that.
Okay, I haven't heard that question being asked. Do you want to consider a bar under a minor versus a major, which simply takes out the city commission?
Right.
Or whether it's permitted? Are any of the ones that are now going through minor, major being proposed to be dropped down to permitted?
That are now going through?
Anything that's currently that would require going through, that would then no longer require minor or major?
Yeah, again, it's got to depend on the intensity, right? What I mentioned earlier,
Okay.
it's got to depend on the zone district.
Okay. 2 weeks ago.
So it's not that black and white. I just want to make that clear.
I know, and I'm saying, this is where,
Can I just suggest?
can I finish the question? Please. It's the details, and if that's what's submitted to the planning board, then that really takes the process. I would like to see another feedback loop that what you're taking as input is in fact being fed back, and you get a double check on that. Secondly, you did get feedback, and you said you were looking into whether or not houses of worship still have to have a separation. Have you found out anything? It seems to me houses of worship that operate during the day, that don't operate towards midnight, I don't know where there's a conflict. And so, can that be removed, or are you proposing to remove that? Do you have any backup data?
That's been the sense, and that is something that's going to be under consideration, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Helen Miller. I live in the Essex House. I want to understand, is the main problem among all this noise? I believe that's the main problem, right? I believe somebody coming from O'Leary's a quarter of a mile away being weighted by noise. So my question is, will these changes and amendments basically help with the noise problem? If that's the main problem. Rather than going in circles here, I'm not understanding.
The noise ordinance is under review for amendment separate from this, somewhat later this fall.
Can we do a meeting like this for noise?
Yeah, I mean, that's.
We won't be bringing forward, ours personally aren't bringing forward a noise ordinance, so.
That's not going to be.
Okay, Cheryl, question?
So I have to say, pretending that the noise is a separate issue really doesn't work for me, because music, outdoor music, could be or should be or part of the review requirement and approval requirement for the operation of not only the outdoor bars, but the indoor bars who have their windows and their doors and everything else open and the noise goes out into the street. So there is a connection between music and noise.
There's a connection in how we're going to be defining a bar and a nightclub with respect to the activity of live amplified music or DJs. Sensitive to the issue of it even being outside, totally understand that as well, but yes, that will be ingrained into the definition, the activity of the live amplified music and DJs as for these uses.
How is that enforced? And how have existing businesses that haven't been meeting these ambiguous definitions been discovered, and what are consequences?
So the SPD would be the agency that enforces noise complaints. And they would, it's a case-by-case basis.
That's not how it works.
Ryan, I have one more question. Is it your intent rooftop bars will be in the same category as outdoor dining? Is there going to be any special subclass for something on the 6th floor versus ground floor?
So it'll be an outdoor bar. It's not a rooftop bar, it's an outdoor bar, whether it's on the ground floor, on the 6th floor, on the penthouse level. It's an outdoor bar, and yes, it will be a separate definition and separate process to go through.
But outdoor seating is separate than an outdoor bar.
It's the
Say that again.
But an outdoor seating is separate than an outdoor bar.
Okay, you are taking it. Okay. The gentleman here hasn't had a question.
I know the purpose of doing this is to provide clarity. And so I'm confused that when you're asked very specific questions about is it going to be easier, harder, or the same, that you're not able to provide a crystal clear answer. And so the question from John earlier was, if you want to open a bar on Main Street, we've taken ambiguity away from what the location is. Why can't you simply tell us easier, harder, or the same?
Because it depends, what type of activity is going to be inside that bar? How are they operating? What are their hours? Don't know. So that's what we're trying to define all that.
So give us the scenarios. You've said the purpose is to provide clarity. You can't answer the question. So how are you are you just creating another level of ambiguity, or are you actually solving the problem?
Trying to solve the issue, but I think, the answer will be in the draft that is released next month, and you'll see all the strike through and underline edits to the existing language with the new language.
So
and then from that point, you'll be able to see that. It will go to the design review committee. Then it will go to the planning board, which you all have an opportunity to participate in and make comments at. It'll go to the commission. Once again, you'll have opportunity to make comments, recommendations. There are a whole series of steps before this actually even is being considered to be adopted by the commission.
Yeah, no draft is final until it's adopted by the city commission. We typically file a zoning text amendment and continuously make edits all the way through the process, which is at least a 6-month process.
Okay, Linda.
Thank you, David. I really wanted and appreciate the chance to speak again to clarify, because accuracy is very important to me. And if I said something that wasn't accurate, I want to clarify that for everyone in the room. It's a continuation of the same question that Steve asked and I asked about the treatment of a bar. Could you please bring up the slide that says current review process? It was toward the end, I think. There we go, right? That one. Okay, so, and maybe I misheard something or whatever. So this is what we're talking about. This is the current law right now, bar, outdoor bar, nightclub, and actually tavern as well. So bar right now, major conditional use. Ryan, you said it a couple times, it depends on what the establishment would be and the activities, et cetera, as to whether the major conditional use or minor conditional use. But the way you get to that determination is the determination as to whether the establishment is a bar, outdoor bar, or nightclub. The planning board makes that determination, and then from there applies the rule that goes with that type of establishment. I think the question that the audience is trying to ask is, if it's determined, if the establishment is determined to be a bar in the downtown core, what are you all proposing, or are you thinking of proposing, you all meaning the city, in that top line there, next to the word bar, if it's determined to be a bar in the downtown core, what is the current thinking? Let's start with the bar one. What's the current thinking that wording would say? Major conditional use, minor conditional use, or permitted?
I think I tried to address that earlier. My answer hasn't changed.
Which is what?
Can you give us some scenarios?
Excuse me, Ryan, what's your answer?
I don't have an answer right now because we haven't finalized the language yet. So I think once it's finalized, you'll see.
So you don't have, like on the other things, you gave us specific things, the specific changes that you're planning to do at this point in time. Is it the case then that truly the staff doesn't have a proposal in mind yet on this?
I think it's going to, again, have to depend on the intensity, the activity that's going on there, and the zone district.
Excuse me, Ryan, so you're going to change, does that mean the staff is thinking that, to pick up on what Steve said, I think it was Steve, an extra layer of complexity that whether it's major conditional use, minor conditional use, or permitted is not going to depend on whether it's determined to be a bar?
I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah.
Well, let me be clear.
We won't have a draft till next month.
I understand that,
Okay,
Steve.
so
My question is, what is the staff's thinking in terms of the top line that would be there under new review process for a bar, once it's determined to be a bar?
I've already tried to address
Okay,
it.
so
I don't
it
have
sounds
a
like,
definitive
Ryan,
answer.
it sounds like you're saying we're not gonna determine MCU based on whether it's a bar, it's gonna be case by case.
That's what you basically have said, as I understand it.
I'm not sure I said that, but anyways, I think it'll come when the draft is released, it'll be very clear what the process is.
And Patrick,
Maybe I could, Ryan, clarify. So a couple examples come to my mind. If I go to 99 Bottles, that was labeled a bar. Castaneo, the bar. Castaneo's got a garage door. They have outdoor music, but they serve more alcohol than food, but they serve food. 99 Bottles serves food, but I don't think they have outdoor music. They might have had an acoustic guitar inside or something like that. To me, the difference of the music would change the impact on the neighborhood. Is that one of the determinations, how you might look at one of those? If it's more music, it would go through major. If it was no music, it would be minor. Or is that your thinking? Or give us some understanding of where you're trying to apply the differentials.
I think that's well said. Those are two good examples, and I think the point being two very different levels of intensities, right, between 99 Bottles and Castaneo. So yes, that will be taken into consideration as far as, is that a bar, is it a nightclub, and what's the process based on the intensity of those uses? Is it a major conditional use? Is it a minor conditional use? Is it by right?
And also the music level, the music versus is someone just playing a guitar and singing, and
Acoustic
then
guitar
another
versus
bar,
amplified.
they have microphones and it's much louder.
And the hours of which the music
Okay,
continues.
I'm sorry, just one quick follow-up then. Nightclubs. I know the separation cannot be, in the downtown with residential, but a nightclub use in a mixed-use residential building should be denied. We had the one example, we now have Elements, but there used to be a nightclub in 50 Central. And the vibrations that goes through the structure is different from vibrations through the air, between Gator and Mark. But if you're in the same structure, that's a huge difference. And a nightclub that goes late in the night, to me, should be a non-permitted use, period. Is that something that you would consider and could consider, that in those specific situations where it's in that same structured building, it would be non-permitted? Could that be considered?
It could be.
Cheryl.
So I like what Patrick just said, by the way, and I'm glad you're going to consider it, but I think we're now getting to the meat of the issue finally. And since, and a big missing piece of the puzzle is this whole intensity criteria, which is important, but we don't know what your thoughts are. What are the gradations? What are the criteria that will determine the different intensity levels? And I think it would be very helpful if you had another workshop like this, once you have that thought through, and we can give you input into whether we agree with or have suggestions for improving your intensity gradations that will have such an impact on the approvals that you might give.
Well, I think we alluded to it earlier. I think it's the amplification of music, live amplified music or a DJ, and the hours of that activity when that's happening. I think those are the two key issues.
Who determines the hours? Who determines if they can have the music till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1:30? I mean, is that, I don't know. So
I think that would be baked into the definition, right?
okay, so when they get this permit, then it will say that currently you can have live music till midnight.
If that was the cutoff time, yes. And then if you're after midnight, and then you're a different use and it's a different process, let's say. If that's
So each process, each intensity might have a different,
it could.
On hours.
Definitely could.
Okay, John, you have a question?
Okay, so, we're not looking at the fact that there's a sound ordinance. And 48 has been telling us we're going to get a revised sound ordinance for 3 years, okay? If you have another meeting, it was suggested here that you have a meeting like to talk, that Cheryl mentioned, to talk about intensity, timing, etc. It has to include the revised sound ordinance. My suggestion would be you get Mr. Fournier here and with you folks, and let's discuss this, because the intensity, the timing, the days of the week, okay, because most of that is already defined in the sound ordinance. The problem is it's not enforced. We need both. We need a revised sound ordinance and we need enforcement.
Okay, and John, I can say Bob Fournier is well aware of this meeting that's going on and understands the interplay of the two elements. So he's understanding he's part of the puzzle.
Is he gonna issue the revised sound ordinance?
I can't answer for him, I think it's still a ways off, and I don't really.
It's very well.
I've got a few answers.
Observation, yeah.
Oh, okay. Come on and make your observations.
I am brand new to Sarasota. Thank
Oh,
you. It seems like you are going, as a city, going through major growing pains. I don't, from what I hear all over the place, and I'm now a new owner in the Mark, and so I've taken a lot of time and thought of purchasing there. It seems that there's good in all. I mean, I want to have music, I want to have restaurants, I want to have good retail, and, you know, I think what Cheryl said earlier, is there a vision that you have for Sarasota? I mean, I came down as a vacationer and then purchased, but I don't see is there a vision other than over near the, you know, the new park and everything? Maybe you should have a focus group, if you had a focus group session?
I'd like to touch on the vision thing because, you know,
I'm
it's
just,
been
my
mentioned.
observation, it seems like it's,
So, I mean.
I guess the question is, have you got having a focus group, and that way you don't get for the certain ones?
I don't know what we need to do. I mean, how many people here don't want a downtown that has a lot of vitality, a lot of different options, a lot of different opportunities?
Those are
and a
all
great place to
ambiguous
live.
words. You
And a
need to
great place
put
to
more
live.
precision around
But
it.
you don't have to interrupt me, sir.
It's just not precise enough.
Right. So, I mean, we all want that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the downtown is going to grow, everybody knows that. The city's going to grow. And so to maintain that vitality and maintain that interest and everything else that's going on, the downtown is going to be constantly adjusting. You know, the market is going to be adjusting. And so, you know, whether we have 5,000 additional residents, 10,000 or whatever, obviously, if we just stick with what we have now and nothing more, and nothing changes, that's not going to work. So.
My point was, I came because the city's growing, and it's exciting
Right.
to me, so I think it's fantastic. I
Right.
just think it sounds like there's just not.
So and we know there are going to be more restaurants, there are going to be more bars, there are going to be more stores, there's going to be more of everything. What we're trying to do is really clarify, lay out the rules, and we're not giving away the ship, we're not turning it into Bourbon Street, we have no interest in that at all. You know, but what we do want is a downtown with vitality that does attract restaurants. You even mentioned, 95% of the businesses and bars and restaurants you don't have a problem with. Okay, there are always going to be a few. There are always going to be a few. But what we want to do is really kind of lay out the groundwork so that the city grows, it's clear, it's easy, it's understandable, and there's a public process. So,
Thank you.
I would suggest too that outdoor bars get the most stringent process because of the impact. And in addition to that, I think you need to look at how you're going to measure the sound at the actual perimeter that is affecting people. Because we get the police out and they measure the sound from the ground level, and it is nowhere near what it is that we're experiencing. I mean, I clock sound frequently from Artivation over 100, 80, 90, 100. And I get thousands of screenshots of that there. I cannot enjoy a Bible city if I'm not sleeping. So, and I can tell you too that I know many people in our area who have actually moved because of the issue. So that depreciates our property value. And as you're aware, they did not go through, or actually, in my opinion, facilitated around the process that we were entitled to.
Okay, Jim Lamble.
Yeah, I say this every year, we're here because Sarasota is a different kind of city. Most of us live downtown, we could live in Denver or Phoenix, we could live in Tampa, we could live in Orlando, Steve. We could live where you came from, which was outside Arlington. And I've been all those places, we've been all over these places. We don't want to be those cities. We do not want to be Arlington, we do not want to be Nashville. And we're parochial, and it's special, and we want to maintain what's special. going to do really well just being different, you know, so like Portland, Oregon. We don't mind being different. We want to purposely be different. We don't want to work in Phoenix and Denver and other places where we've all lived. That's the overarching message here. And I think we need to look at our zoning and keep it restrictive so we can keep it special here. And that's what I think the audience is telling us.
I think those are some really good points. And just to address your concern, I don't want this to be Arlington either. I was there. I don't want Sarasota to be Arlington.
Okay, this gentleman had a question.
First of all, just an observation, it seems to me when you talk about intensity as a rubric, as a condition to getting permits, you're inviting people to game the system. So they go in for a low-level bar license, they get a quick approval, and then all of a sudden they're gonna have an electric guitar, and then all of a sudden they're gonna, you know, and so that leads you to the enforcement mechanism. So what is, when we had a meeting with the city attorney regarding noise, and when we discussed it with the city attorney, he said it's very difficult because under the current noise ordinance, when the police make a complaint, it goes to the courts, and it needs to go to the magistrate, which would make it a lot easier to enforce. Is that going to be the case?
We're not here for noise. I mean,
No, I'm not talking about noise. I'm talking about enforcement of your rules.
Yeah, I think if there was, you know, in your example, if there was some amplified music being played after a certain time and they weren't allowed to, they didn't have the permit to do so, yes, that'd be a combination, you know, SPD and then code enforcement, and then that would involve that they'd go through the code process to address that.
Would that be, would that go to the court or to the magistrate?
Probably the magistrate in that case.
But I would suggest to you
that if it's
the enforcement through the magistrate as opposed to the court is very important.
Okay, the woman here, please. Yes, ma'am.
You know, we're told that these noise issues are code enforcement issues, and
I didn't say that. I said it was SPD. It was noise.
well,
the police department.
That they tell us their hands are tied. So, but from what I understand, we don't have any code enforcement people on at night when these issues are occurring.
That's
So I would
right.
just suggest to you that that's something that really needs to be looked at.
So it would be a combination in the gentleman's example, SPD and code. SPD obviously is working those hours, and there's an activity going on that they're not supposed to do after a certain time. They would make a report of that, and then could work in conjunction with code enforcement, code compliance to go through that special magistrate process if there's a violation.
Then one more question.
Thank you. To follow up on that, I have a suggestion, a request, and that request is that you include the staff include in the proposals some reference to the noise code. I understand that this process isn't, licensing of bars and restaurants isn't about, it's not the same as the sound code, but as people have pointed out, music makes sound. Outdoor activity makes sound, and Ryan was talking about intensity and types of usages and activities. So sound is a byproduct of the functionality of the establishment, whatever it is, bar, restaurant, whatever it is, coffee shop, whatever it is, especially outside. So we can always have, as basically legislatures writing our policies, we can always have statements that are like policy statements that are reminders of the relevance and relationship among our different parts of our laws. So I request that you include in the write-ups of the ZTAs for this, somewhere that there be a reference as a policy statement that the sound code applies as applicable, or some language like that. So it's a nod, a recognition that indeed sound is related to operations of bars and restaurants.
Okay.
And when the sound is continuing after 1 o'clock.
Okay, Cheryl,
when
I
it's
think this will
supposed to
be,
stop, then you do need to
this will be the last question, please.
I would just ask that you have as your overarching vision, framework, mantra, whatever, as the city continues to grow, which is good, and is vibrant, which is good, that it be vibrant and livable. Please always keep that in mind as you are coming up with definitions, as you are reviewing vibrant and livable. Then we can all be good neighbors.
Okay, and just one, Eileen Normile, former planning board member.
Can I just request that when you write the standards of review for the planning board and the city commission for the minor and major conditional use, that one of them be the difficulty of enforcement? So that when they take all these things into account, one is the difficulty of enforcement of things like the noise ordinance. I mean, unless there's a miracle in technology, no noise ordinance is going to be easy to enforce for the police. And the code enforcement as well is difficult. So the difficulty of enforcement of whatever minor or major conditional use is being considered by the planning board or the city commission should be taken into account. And that's easy enough to build that into the standards of review.
Okay, just final comment. Police officer, thank you for coming. We met, and I forgot your name, sir, but I appreciate, would you introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, my name is Dustin Luciano. I'm the patrol sergeant, the administrative sergeant of the patrol. So.
Good, thank you for what you do. Okay, thanks for being here. With that, let's call it a wrap, and we certainly appreciate your time and everybody.